Good morning, grade sixes. Welcome to your daily lesson of mathematics brought to you by WorksheetCloud. I hope you guys are all really well and looking forward to today's lesson. A reminder of the email address on your screen, grade6@worksheetcloud.com. Please feel free to use it to send me any feedback or questions and queries that you might have. Today we're going to continue looking at data handling and we're going to have a look at a few more graphs. So it's a continuation from the last lesson. We have our warm-ups, mental arithmetic questions, and your brain bender on either side of that main theme. So I hope you guys are looking forward to getting stuck in, and let's go have a look at our warm-up activity. So today you need to tell me the value of all the symbols and the pink question mark at the end. And you can see that there's a combination of operational signs, so make sure you understand and remember which operation comes first. So the order of operations is really starting to become important for you. Press pause, give it a shot, and press play to see how you get on. So I'm going to start on the second line, and I know that 4 equals 5 minus 1. Okay, so that cake is 1. I then know from this line over here that 23 plus 1 is equal to 24. So that means 8 multiplied by 3 is also equal to 24. So we know that the biscuit or chocolate chip cookie is equal to 8. If we then go down to the fourth line, 1 is going to equal to 9 minus 8. Okay, so the packet with the loaves of bread in it is equal to 9. We know that the bread is equal to the mixer. So that's 9 equal to 9. Okay, and then at the top, we must have 9 for the mixer. We must have 1 for the cake. So we know that already. 9 plus 1 is 10. So that means the donut must be 7. And then when we go to the bottom, we just fill in the values. 9 plus 9 times 8. And we should know that multiplication comes first, so 9 times 8 is 72, and then we add the 9, and we get a final answer of 81. Okay? Well done if you got that. Let's go have a look at our mental arithmetic questions for today. Okay, there are your 8 mental arithmetic questions for today, all based on past taught principles. Press pause, work through them slowly, check your work like we have been doing over the past few weeks, and give everything your best shot, and let's see how you guys get on. Okay, question number 1 is the addition of decimals. So we've got 149,753, and to that we are adding 419,473. Sorry, my addition sign is not very neat there. There we go. Okay, and then we just add normally. Remember to carry where necessary. Decimals line up. And your final answer will be 569,226. Thousands column. 6 is in the thousandth column. 2 is in the 10th column. Sorry, 100th column. That 2 is in the 10th column. And then obviously units, tens, and hundreds. Okay, just a little recap of place value for you. Question 2, subtraction of decimals. And again, very similar to addition. We make sure that the decimals line up. We borrow when necessary, and then we go and we subtract as per usual. Please remember the checking strategy that we use when we do subtraction. We do the inverse or opposites. 2 plus 9 is 11, 5 plus 4 is 9, 0 and 8 is 8, 4 and 7 is 11, 4 and 2 is 6, so therefore our calculation must be correct. For question number 3, you have 53 multiplied by 12, And by now I'm sure you realize and you know that there are multiple ways in which we can do multiplication sums. So I'm going to split this up, and I'm going to say 53 multiplied by 10 first is 530. And then I'm going to say 53 multiplied by 2 is 106. Then I'm going to add them together, and I'm going to get 636. Perhaps you might have done doubling and halving. So let's see if we can get the same answer of 636. If I doubled 53, I would have got 106, and halved 12, I would have got 6. If I doubled 106, I would have got 212. Halved 6, I would have got 3. And now you can see 200 times 3 is 600. And 12 times 3 is 36. And we do indeed get the same answer of 636. So our calculations must be correct. Question number 4 is division, and here we're dividing by 2, and we know that when we divide by 2, we just simply need to halve. But if you wanted to show your method and your calculations, which I always encourage you to do, then you are looking at doing the following: 4,453. To check that, we need to multiply it by 2, and I'm just doing another multiplication method here for you. 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 4 is 8, plus the 1 is 9, and 2 times 4 is 8. And you can see the numbers are the same, so we must be correct. Question number 5, the addition of fractions. And you can notice that they have different denominators. So 3 over 10 plus 1/3. Your lowest common multiple of 10 and 3 is going to be 30. So remember, we call that the LCD, lowest common denominator. 10 goes into 30 3 times. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 goes into 30 10 times. So 10 times 1 is 10. So therefore we have 19 over 30 as our answer. And that cannot be simplified any further. Question number 6 is the division of a decimal by a multiple of 10. And in this case it is 10. And we know that when we divide by 10, our number gets one place smaller. So our answer is 13,498. Question 7, we haven't had a question like this for a while. So question 7, 42 divided by b is equal to 7. So what could b possibly be? And you should know your multiplication times tables. 42 divided by 6 is equal to 7. So therefore b is equal to 6. And then your last question is a measurement or conversion question. Okay, and we did lessons on these. So if there's any particular question that you may be stuck on or you can't remember, then please go back and have a look at the online lessons along with the activities and memos that are linked to those particular lessons, and they can all be found on WorksheetCloud.com. Have a look, recap, consolidate, and just make sure you understand the principle that you're confused with. We know that there are 100 centimeters in a meter, so therefore to get from meters to centimeters we multiply by 100, and that's going to give us an answer of 250 centimeters. Okay, well done if you worked through those and you managed to remember all those concepts. Let's go have a look at a few more graphs. Okay, here we're looking at double line graphs. So in the previous lesson we looked at a single line graph. And a double line graph we use when we want to compare two sets of data in relation to the same thing. Okay? So double line graphs are the same as regular line graphs, except they show two different sets of data. So you can look at Dr. Fun's Toy Emporium. You can see on the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, it's sales in millions of rands, and that goes from 0 to 120 million. Okay, notice that there's a break in the axis, and there's a question on that for you to answer. The x-axis or the horizontal axis is in months. There's a nice title for the graph, and then there's a key, and the dotted line shows you the sale of X-ray specs, and the solid line shows you the sale of the combat copter. There are 2 questions for you to complete. So I'd like you to go and do this by yourself, and then have a look at how you get on when I go through this question with you on the Jamboard. Off you go. 2 questions regarding this double line graph. So the first question says, why is there a break in the scale from 50 or from 0 to 50? Okay, so if you look at the bottom left corner of the graph, you'll see there's a little break in the vertical axis from 0 to 50. Now you can see that the interval is 10. So 50 to 60 is 10, 60 to 70 is 10, 70 to 80 is 10, and so on. So why then would they use this break in the x-axis? And the answer is because if you have a look at the dotted line graph and the solid line graph, none of them enter into the region from 0 to 50. Okay, so they can make a break from 0 to 50 because there's no information that needs to be put in for 0, 10, 20, 30, or 40. Your first entry, as you can see with the X-ray specs, starts at 50. So that is the reason behind the break in the vertical axis. Okay? The second question says, read the following and correct it where necessary. So I'm just going to highlight the area that's wrong and then explain to you what's wrong about it. So it says the vertical axis is showing us the year of the sale. Now this is the vertical axis here, the y-axis. And you can clearly see from the label, sales in millions of rands, that the vertical axis is actually showing us the value of rands or the value of money from sales. So that's going to be your first correction. Okay, so it's not year of the sale, it's the total value of sales. Second line, the scale of this graph is going up by 50 each time. Now the scale, which you can see on the y-axis, initially goes up from 0 to 50. But as I've already explained, the reason behind that, because there's a break in the scale, we cannot use that 0 to 50 as the scale of the graph. We need to look at all the entries, and you can see that each time it is going up by a value of 10. So that is another area that you should have corrected. The scale of this graph is going up by 10 each time. Third line. This graph shows that the sales of X-ray specs have been increasing rapidly, while the sales of combat copter have been decreasing over the same amount of time. So let's have a look at X-ray specs. In January, they sold 100 million rands worth of X-ray specs. But that has decreased to 50 million rand in May. The value of combat copter in January was about 55 million, and that has steadily increased to 110 million in May. So they've actually got the description the wrong way around. So what this graph shows is that the sales of X-ray specs have actually decreased rapidly, while the sales of combat copter have increased over the same amount of time. So those will be the corrections that you should have made in question number 2. The next type of graph I'd like to look at is called the travel graph, and it is literally indicating type or amount of travel. So you can see on the y-axis you've got distance in kilometers, and that goes from 0 to 180, and you can see that the interval is 20 kilometers each time. And then on the x-axis, you've got time. Okay, so you start at 9 a.m. and it ends at 7 p.m. And you've got to read the information off this graph. So there are 4 questions there for you to consider. Go through them, have a look at the graph and see if you can extrapolate the information from the graph to answer the questions, and then press play to see how you get on. How long did the Jordan family spend at the vet? So if we have a look at the graph, you can see that between 1:30 and 3:30, they were stationary for the longest period of time. So from 1:30 to 3:30 is going to be 2 hours. How far did they travel between 9 a.m. and 1:30 p.m.? So you have to look that at 9 a.m. is going to be 0, and at 1:30 p.m., which is over here, is going to be in line with 160, and we can just extrapolate that by drawing a line across to the vertical axis. So therefore they traveled 160 kilometers. Question 3. How far did they travel between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m.? So again, we can use different colors to extrapolate the data, and there's 3:30 p.m. Okay, and here is 4:30 p.m. So in that hour, you can notice they went from 160 kilometers and they ended up at 80 kilometers. So we know that 160 take away 80 is going to be 80 kilometers. Question 4. For how long did they drive home before realizing they had left something at the vet? So if you look at this particular graph, the further they get away from home, the higher the graph goes. Okay, and then when the graph starts decreasing in value, then they're getting closer to home. So from this point at 3:30 to the point at 4:30, they're getting closer to home. But then you can see that the graph increases again in that area, which means they got further away from home before returning back to home at the end. So therefore, for how long did they drive home before realizing that they had to turn back to the vet? Would have been from 3:30 to 4:30, and that would have been 1 hour. Okay? Right, let's go have a look at what's next. Here is a second travel graph, and this is a road trip that Johnny took. And you can see again on the vertical axis is distance in kilometers, and on the horizontal axis is time of the day. And then you've got the straight line travel graph between each point. There's 6 questions there that I'd like you to answer. You've just got to fill in the missing words. Give it a shot, read the data off the graph, and then press play to see how you get on. Question 1, Johnny left for his road trip at what time? So you can see when the graph starts. The graph starts at 6 a.m. Okay, so he left for his trip at 6 a.m. He stopped for breakfast at 7 a.m. because you can see there the line stagnates, so it doesn't increase in distance at all between 7 and 7:30. So he stopped for breakfast at 7 a.m. and continued at 7:30. Third question, by 9 a.m. he had ridden how many kilometers? So here we just look at 9 a.m. and we go up to the graph and we go across to the vertical axis. And now you need to figure out what the scale of the vertical axis is, and you should be able to work out that each horizontal line is worth 25 kilometers. So you can see that that's going to be 225 kilometers. Question 4, he stopped to stretch his legs at 9 a.m. All right, so you can see here at 9 a.m. he stopped for an hour. All right? So that question's answer is 9 a.m. Question 5, he turned around to ride home at what time? So you can see at 11 a.m. the graph starts to decrease, which means he's getting closer to home. Okay, so that means that at 11 a.m. he turned around to go home. And the last question, he rode at what speed all the way home? Okay, so here you need to look, right, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. is how many hours? Yes, 3 hours. And how far does he drive or ride in 3 hours? So you can see it's 300 kilometers in 3 hours. So therefore, 300 divided by 3 is 100 kilometers per hour. Okay, I hope you guys could read that information off the graph. If not, go back and have a look at the recording. Also, go back and have a look at the online activity and memo from this lesson and from the previous lesson, because they both contain graphs that you can work through to try and practice your extrapolation and your understanding of graphs and how to read information off them. Okay, the last part of our graph theme is this slide. And now you have 3 different types of travel graphs. And I'd like you to read through the description of the graphs in green, in the green blocks with yellow writing, and you need to match them up to the graphs on the left. Okay? Press pause and let's see how you get on with this last activity. Okay, let's have a look at the first description. I was on my way to a party when I realized I'd forgotten the present, so I turned around and went home again. Now, we've already discussed in the previous travel graphs that the further you get away from home, the steeper the graph climbs, and then when it goes back down again, it means that you're going back closer to home. So I'm going to say that the information from the first description is going to join with the middle graph, okay? So I'm going to join those two together. Let's see what the other descriptions say. Perhaps I've made a mistake. On the way to the beach, we stopped to buy sunscreen. So which graph shows a period where they don't travel any further? And you can see this area over here is where they've stopped as the distance from home has not increased. So on the way to the beach, they stopped to get sunscreen, will be those two. Then the last description, we traveled at the same speed, not stopping until we got there. And you can see here, there's no stop in that particular graph, and it remains the same gradient. So it stays at the same angle for the entire graph. So that means that it's the same speed. So that graph and that description will link with each other. Okay? Guys, that brings us to our finisher of 24. And by now I'm sure you guys know that, for example, on the first card you've got 2, 8, 4, and 7. And you need to use those 4 numbers with plus, minus, multiply, divide to come up with an answer of 24. Remember, you don't have to use all the operations. You can use 1, you can use 2, you can use 3, or all of them. But you must try and come up with 24 3 times at least. And the second part of the challenge is to try and come up with more than 3 ways of getting an answer of 24. Grade 6s, thanks very much for joining me today. That brings us to the end of our series on graphs. From here we have a look at data handling and averages. Okay, so what do we do with the data once we know about it, and how can we use it to determine various things? So please have a look out for those lessons that will be coming up. A reminder of the online activity and memo that comes with this lesson, and that's all accessible through WorksheetCloud.com, and you can go back through all the other lessons on WorksheetCloud.com and access past lessons, past activities, and past memos, and I'd really encourage you to make the most of this opportunity to improve your studies. Please let me know if there are any questions, feedback, suggestions, or concerns, and I will try and address them in the forthcoming lessons. Keep safe, keep well, and all the best.